joint board's meeting of Select Board, Finance Committee, and School Committee in particular order. And we'll start our meeting tonight with Pledge of Allegiance. Led by John.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is there anything for open forum tonight? Well, I mentioned last Tuesday, I mentioned again tonight that Friday, the 4-H fair starts at the 4-H fairgrounds. If you want to see great kids doing great work for the better community, drop by and check them out on Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. Before we start with the finance affairs tonight, a brief select board item, which is the discussion of and possible voting on a resolution related to the Neshoba Valley Medical Center closing. You've probably been following that in your emails. I won't elaborate, but AIR has asked all surrounding towns to join them in pushing for the maintenance of the Neshoba Valley Medical Center staying open. We're less exposed from a first responder standpoint than say Groton, certainly AIR, Pepperell, but we do have about 7% or so of our runs are to Neshoba, mostly because of ridge-related to Groton, but it is a non-trivial closure. Of course, we do want to stand in with our fellow towns because it does create a medical desert in that part of the state. We're lucky that we've still got Emerson, Neshoba, Emerson and Leahy near to us, but if you're out that part of the state, you're kind of at the mercy of the forest. So we have a resolution that was based loosely upon what other towns have done. Krista made it a little more personable for us, relevant for us. And it's been circulated. Has anyone got any comments on it? Chris Barrett had some minor grammatical stuff, but other than that,
One minor grammatical thing, but then the other thing, it pretty well parallels what AIR sent out in their resolution, I think. So I think it's kind of a compilation or something. I think it's okay.
I'm fine with it. I'll move to approve and to send it.
for a second? Okay, so we only have two of us tonight anyway. Tom is traveling and Chris has got an emergency with his family. So with that in case, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thanks.
Do we have a second?
Yeah, John,
Thank
John,
you.
yeah.
Thank you.
I'm not clerk, but I figured that one out. So I guess we kind of did introductions last time, but I think we may have a couple of new faces, at least in person, so we can try it quickly one more time. And we may as well start with Michael, and we'll just go right around, and then we'll go online after we've done the room.
Mike Edwards, Assistant Town Manager.
Kristen Last, Town Manager.
Dan O'Donnell, the Town Finance Director.
Scott Hastings, Select Board.
Not going to am select board.
Andrea Parrish, Sweet Select Board.
Lori Oliver, School Committee.
Valerie Young, School Committee. Catherine Clear, School Committee.
Bill McDonald, School Committee.
Christina Green, Finance Committee.
Shelby McLeod, Finance Committee.
Dennis Galvin, Finance Committee.
Shinji Yu, Finance Committee.
Beth Morrison, Finance Committee.
John Fryer, Finance Committee.
And I guess I don't know who's actually in order in the line online, so just take your pick.
John Leffers, Finance Committee. Nate Cannon, Finance Committee.
Christopher Chu, Superintendent of Schools.
Thanks. That will be everybody. So with that in mind, thanks. Welcome to the meeting tonight. It's a nice humid summer night as we get ready for back to school. So we don't have firm, just so we're clear tonight, we're still working on closing out FY24. We're beginning the process for FY25. So this is a review of where we are really early at where we're going for the coming year. But wanted to make sure we promised the town we would keep you up to date as we went through these efficiencies, began the budget process. So wanted to fulfill that part of our responsibility and share with you progress over the past month or so. So Dan, if you wanted to go on with what we know so far about budget closeouts?
Sure. So I'm going to go high level through these. These are the worksheets that I send to the Finance Committee every year by August 30th that Jesse Byer, our town accountant, puts together. They're still in draft form because, as Scott just said, we're still working on the year-end process, just wrapping up June cash reconciliation and a few other things that we need to check before we actually close the system. So everybody's working hard on that. But just going through, looking at some of the closeouts here. Again, we usually have this done by August 30th. We have had quite a few finance staff actually retire and leave work with us, so we've been not dealing with our full employment for the year within the town. So luckily we just got back up to full staff, which is great, so we're moving along there. Some big ones here. Typically, we turn back money from the FinCom reserve each year, about $28,000. We actually used it more this year than we have in the past. We allocated about $97,000 for projects towards the end that were emergencies, needed funding. Moving down, the comp reserve, that's what we use to settle contracts within the town and fund budgets. So we have some flexibility on that funding. I'm very stingy with it, so basically I wait until we know we need to actually transfer it, usually a few months into the year, and try to keep that number as low as possible. And if we can close money back, we absolutely do so. So we're able to close back $45,000 of that this year. Other expenses here, permitting had some leave of absences and vacancies. Public buildings, we had a large closeout from Capital. That was for the remaining design funds from 53 Main. Police had a lot of retirements within their department this year, including the deputy chief. So we saw a lot of vacancies, and they worked to backfill those positions that were open with new officers towards the end of the year. Expenses there, this is actually a good thing. A lot of that was savings from gasoline because of the hybrid vehicles. So I think what we actually spent this year was around $75,000 against $90-some-odd-thousand budget. So the hybrids are efficient, which is great. Public safety, every year we turn about $70,000 to $85,000. We just couldn't get that 12th dispatcher in the door. Every time we hired somebody, there would be another vacancy come up. So in 25, we are not filling that position. If anybody has a question on the budget as we're going, please just interrupt me. The schools, their closeout is from the prior year encumbered amount from FY23, so they can no longer spend that, so that amount's closing out. And DPW, of course, we had the DPW director leave at the end of December and the business manager retire. So Kyle Fox was promoted to DPW director sometime in January, I believe. March
Yeah.
full-time, but interim in between. And of course, we had closeouts from highway. We had a lot of turnover at the highway department this year. The state was hired a few of our drivers because their CDLs are in demand. So we did have some vacancies this year, along with the assistant highway superintendent, which we're looking to staff as well. The $173,000 expenses, that's still a nice expense that we did not need, which is fantastic. We appropriated $400,000 back in April just to get us through the year. If we didn't need it, we close it out, and here's our closeout from that. Recycling and trash, we closed out about $80,000 a piece for those. Recycling, because the blended value actually dropped this year. We had budgeted about $160,000, but the value of recyclables has gone up. And that's a good thing for us because we get credit for that stream of recycling that we have.
But is June in there?
June is so for recycling, we're working with Waste Management right now to get things buttoned up. We did encumber some funds for this, but the minimum closeout is at least $79,000 for that. For solid waste, same thing. We just had less tonnage. As we're coming out of COVID, we're throwing less away. We had slightly more than last year, but again, not as much as what we budgeted. So that's also a positive.
But wasn't there a boom we thought in June? Did it actually materialize?
We haven't gotten the data yet, so we're still waiting for that.
So we do have an encumbrance out there, but 81 is being closed out. Just moving forward, again, more vacancies. Council on Aging, they weren't able to fill all of their senior tax abatement spots So we did have a closeout of quite a few dollars from that. It's about $13,800, and the rest is basically from van drivers. The library had a lot of retirements this year. This is always an Ellen succession plan, and we had many people retire in the past 12 months. In Parks and Grounds, we had a vacancy, and we didn't hire any seasonal staff this year for their department. So debt service, we had a couple projects that we budgeted debt for, but we're not ready to permanently borrow. That's the Plain Road sidewalk, the Senior Center HVAC, which we actually transferred some funding out of in May to do some budget transfers. And then it's the Carlisle Road sidewalk, which is underway if you've driven through there. So we'll have a payment soon on that, but that money closed out for this year. State assessments I'll talk about in the next slide, but our unclassified, which pays for like our retirement, health insurance, general insurance, and all that, we had more people enroll in medics this year because they retired, that it actually was quite a bit over budget. It was about pretty good increase there, about almost 100,000 more than we anticipated. Luckily, we had savings on our workers' comp and other general insurance that could absorb that increase without going over the budget, but we were cutting it closer than we usually do in past years. So overall, from expenses, we have about $2,073,000 closing back to free cash at year end, unaudited, that is. So that's what generates free cash at the end of one portion of what generates free cash is the closeouts from the expense budget. So we do count on these to pay for capital in the following year. Without these closeouts, we need to fund capital within the operating budget, which is, there's not room to do that right now. So this free cash is important to have.
And,
Dan, do you know, I saw capital items like listed in with operating expenses.
Yep.
Do you have a breakdown of what that 2 million is, like capital versus operating?
Not in front of me, but I can get that for you.
All right, thanks.
yeah.
None of these closeouts, none of these accounts, the departments that have them, is there any retained revenue arrangements with them where they keep the excess?
That's next.
Oh, all right.
Come on, right up.
I'm ahead of you, sorry.
I guess, how is that 2 million compared to the past, say, couple of years?
It's kind of in line. Like in past years, we've had some from the schools. We've had more from the 945 account before the health insurance trust. But 2 million, it's a good number. But we have had a lot of vacancies throughout the year, so we lost that productivity as well. So it's in line. At the end of the day, we're expecting our free cash to be certified over $5 million, but we're of course not committing to that just yet because we have to go through that whole process. But last year's 5.8 million as a reference point, so we're rebuilding the funds, which is good.
Dan, just to clarify, when you say some of that 2 million is vacancies, those are below your status quo staffing levels that you're planning to rehire? Like they're not, it's not like personnel that you're gonna leave open, right? You're planning to rehire them and staff back up?
For those, except the ones that were listed for town meeting.
Right, so like 2 police officers, we're not rehiring. That was budgeted in fiscal '24, it's not budgeted in fiscal '25. One of the dispatchers was budgeted in fiscal '24, so you saw that turn back. It's not budgeted in fiscal '25.
Okay.
So there
some of
are
it is.
some positions,
Oh, okay.
yes.
Thanks.
But some of that too is either if a person leaves, until you hire somebody new, you aren't paying that salary.
Correct.
And sometimes you replace a senior person with a more junior person, so you net. So I mean, a lot of that is churn that happens. It's not always good, but it happens.
No, but you know, we don't just hire the first person who comes in either. It's one of the most important things we do as a service organization. So we want to make sure we're hiring the correct person. That if we have to go out 2 or 3 times, we're going to do that just to get the correct person in the door. So it takes a while sometimes. All right, on to Dennis's enterprises. The first up is Water Enterprise, and again, they had a vacancy. The cost of chemicals went down, all sorts of savings there. The reserve fund, they only tapped in for $27,000. We didn't have a major catastrophe this year, and some of the debt was not borrowed either. So we're replacing $803,000 worth of retained earnings, which again, that can go to future water projects for capital. Scrolling down, we have Recreation Enterprise, and they had a pretty good closeout. We knew one of these positions was not backfilled throughout the year, so that was great. So they're replenishing their retained earnings that they applied to the FY25 budget of $200,000, and the revenue came in a little bit higher too. So they're in pretty good shape heading into 25. Ambulance, they generated 6,800, so that goes back to ambulance retained earnings. And stormwater,
Actually, one step on the ambulance.
yep.
Okay, we raised our rates because Medicare raised their rates. So is that surplus, was it better the past couple of months?
The revenue did go up. We had budgeted, I think last year is about $1,070,000 something, and we're over 1.2 million in revenue for ambulance for FY24. So the rate increase did help. We also had more calls, I believe, too. So it's definitely a mix of factors into that. And going down to stormwater enterprise, we weren't able to hire the stormwater engineer this year, but
Right, which we just made an offer on for.
which is fantastic.
25, yep.
And then they had some expenses, some debt that wasn't borrowed as well as part of the, I believe, Oak Hill project, which we're wrapping up and going to permanently borrow soon, and some capital that closed out.
We do have a question from Nate Scott whenever you're ready.
Or whenever Dan's ready.
Sure.
Fire away, Nate.
Thank you. Dan, just a question on this, forgive my just new trying to understand. The stormwater enterprise, is this the fund that the impervious surfaces separate fee that we all get, that we pay into, that's the source of revenue for this?
That's the source, yep.
Okay. And is that amount of the closed fund to balance, is that pretty typical for this, for this line? Or is that higher?
You know, I can't remember last year's, but there typically is closeouts. I know there have been personal services just because we haven't been able to hire that stormwater engineer. Again, looking for the right person. But we typically have a closeout back to stormwater.
Okay, great, thank you.
Nice.
We'll try to get some charts out to this group in the next few weeks just about the history up to this date. So that will probably be
Yep.
easier for people to understand.
Well, my caution is if you're watching this at home for the first time, you're seeing what appears to be all kinds of good news in terms of money being returned. But the thing is, every year this happens, so the question is, are we ahead or behind where we were for the past couple of years?
So this is cyclical, and the enterprise closeouts don't really help the general fund budget. So the real number we're focusing on here is the $2 million going back to the general fund, $2,073,000. All right, so those are the, let's stop sharing for a second here, bring up the revenue portion here. Again, these are draft, still working on this. All right, and these are the other FinCom sheets that we share. I just gotta share my screen. Here we go. All right, this is state aid, or what we used to call the cherry sheet, because back 30 years ago, it used to come on a cherry sheet of paper to each town. So that name stuck. And this is, I'm sorry, this is the cherry sheet. Here we go, the state aid.
Still in FY24, correct?
Yeah, FY24. That's so everybody can see it. So our biggest revenue from state aid is Chapter 70. We did receive all $17,830,000 from the state. And you can see here our second largest is the unrestricted general government aid of $2.5 million. So all that came in. There are some variances here from on a couple of these lines. The biggest one being the exemptions for the vets, blind, and survey. The reason for that is that this receipt came in early FY24 for FY23 exemptions. So they have a timing issue at the state where they're not reimbursing us quite as fast as they should be. But that just, in this case, because it's more money, it's helping out our free cash estimate at year end.
And Dan, just to clarify, those two columns are the budget from when the town manager presents her budget
Yep.
to the actual of when the governor signs the budget, correct?
Yep, so with the state, we have no say in this. We have to use on the recap what the state tells us to use. So it's not in a field we can fill in. So when we get to the 25 budget, I'll show you those numbers.
Yep.
So basically, another portion of this is we have offset items for direct expenditure, and they're school choice funds for the schools that they can spend without appropriation, and the libraries get money as well. So we'll see that in FY25, those revised amounts. They also charge us for regional expenses. It's the most efficient way to actually do this. They actually back it out of the monthly payment they send us each year, and we just account for it on the general ledger at that point. So looking at this.
It's like an income tax, you never see it.
Exactly. So they're withholding some of the state aid to pay for these things. So one of the biggest things that changes throughout the years is school choice sending tuition. When Westford kids go to other schools, we are charged for that through this process. And then we have one here for special education where Westford had a student in a state facility for the year, so they charge us the average cost for educating a student for the year to pay for that student's education. So it's a state.
Yeah.
Yes.
So can you, those chargebacks, can you actually, would you actually subtract those from the total receipts? From the total, the total receipts, like you got the, this chapter aid and unrestricted aid, the total's 20 million, right, 20.5?
Yeah.
Would you subtract those from that? Is that how you do it?
Yeah, so we count for it on the financial model. So we have the revenue coming in, then we count for the expenses separately. So the expenses are accounted for in the model. So we don't vote those at town meeting necessarily because they're just assessments from the state. So it's not part of the regular operating budget. It's just outside that.
I just want to know what the state's doing, that's all.
Mosquito control. Yeah, all these other things here. So the last part of the revenue here that we have is the local receipts and how we perform for FY24. Motor vehicle excise did very well compared to budget. It was about 413,000 over, which is great. That overage does go to free cash and combines with the closeout from the expenses. We have our hotel, motel excise and meals tax that both exceed the budget. Coming up next year, we'll keep an eye on that, but a lot of the meals tax is due to inflation because the cost of meals increased, so we're seeing that. We fell a little bit short on payment in lieu of taxes, just a timing issue with the payments. So we run on a cash basis. Penalties and interest, fees and other charges, they're right in line. Our fees for licenses and permits actually came in 340,000 higher. That is not always the case. It depends what projects are out there being permitted, so we tend to be a little bit cautious with this. And again, we do rely on that free cash generation to fund our capital plans at year end, so it's best to be cautious with this local revenue. And the last one I want to talk about is the investment income. We had a budget of 450,000 based on last year's actual. That went up to 815,000 for the year, just because our investments are doing well. We saw this back in 07 when we brought in about 853,000. I think it's the one slide that you keep showing that goes back that far. And then we had a recession and it just fell off the table. So again, just being cautious with this. We need to make sure we're very deliberate with how we're proceeding. I read that rates are supposed to drop by 1% in the next year. Who knows if that will happen, but we just need to make sure we're not overextending ourselves on projections for this as well. And of course, we have some miscellaneous revenue that comes in that just closes out the free cash at year end. They're not really recurring items. So,
A question on motor vehicle excise tax in particular. Do we have an explanation as to why it was 10% higher than our estimate? Did you just go out and buy a bunch of cars, or what happened?
People bought new cars.
it's new car time.
Well, new cars cost more too. So
Right, that's what I mean. That's why the excise tax.
Inflation.
Electric vehicle.
As population goes up too, and it's based on the Blue Book value of the car, so which doesn't decrease after 5 years. So I think as people are buying new cars, that's increasing.
The inventory is also better after COVID. There was, huge inventory shortage, and now the inventory is a lot better, so.
Multiple factors on that, so.
Dan, there was a jump on Medicaid reimbursement. I was wondering if you had any detail on that.
Yeah, so Medicaid is one of those that a portion of this is for the schools where they're treating students in school and they seek reimbursement for those medical expenses. They fluctuate up and down so much that we have to be careful with budgeting for that, because we could have 40,000 one year, 200,000 next. Another portion of this is we participate in a Medicaid program with the ambulance enterprise where because those on Medicare get discounted ambulance rides, we submit all the information to the state and we get a portion of revenue back through this program that they run. It's called the CPE program. So we got about 80 some odd $1,000 back from that. That goes to the general fund.
Is that like Chapter 70 where they just decide like a multiplier? Or they just decide a reimbursement rate every year depending on how the state outlook looks? Or is that for Medicaid reimbursement?
For the schools? Or
For all of it? When you
for
were
all of
saying,
it?
like, is it that it's more claims or is it that they just decided to reimburse by more percentage?
More claims.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
All right, so I'm gonna stop sharing this for a second. That's our FY '24 estimate right now. So if you see here at the total, we're looking at about $1,576,000 generated to go back to free cash. So that on top of the $2,073,000, it's 3.6 million, excuse me. So that's gonna add to last year's total. We're gonna come up with a free cash number. It gets certified by the state, which we're estimating will be over $5 million for this fiscal year. But we'll release all the information when it's actually approved. But it's looking okay compared to last year. Any questions on that? All right, we can jump to FY '25 here. Go. All right, so here's a little summary we put together for the FY.
Short 11.
A little bit of a lag here. There we go. For FY '25 revenue. So at the annual town meeting in April, we had a resident make a motion to increase the school budget by $378,000. I did speak with that resident before that motion is made, and I advised them not to specify a funding source for it because we can figure that out in October if we need to apply funds to that. So basically, here's a little recap of the three major sources of revenue for the general fund. For tax, we had estimated $750,000 in new growth. We submitted to the state $684,063, so we're about $66,000 short in new growth this year. There wasn't a ton of construction, and we can only assess what's built in the ground as of June 30th. So we missed that target by a little bit. And then you see a little variance with the debt exclusions. During annual town meeting, we had some estimated debt payments for our excluded debt that is for the Blanchard roof. Since that time, we have borrowed short-term, and we know exactly how much we owe for the Blanchard roof. So it's $26,000 less than that. So that's all that the DOR will allow us to raise. We can't use our estimate in that calculation for setting the tax rate, so we do have to lower that. Now to some good news here. We did get the state aid budget. It was passed and signed by the governor on July 28th. You'll see a $342,000 increase to Chapter 70. It's because in the governor's original budget, she had a minimum increase of $30 per student. And once that went through all the House, the Senate, the Conference Committee, that ended up at $104 per student, which is by far the highest we've seen. The past couple of years have been at $60, but anything before that, it was the minimum of $30 per student. So this is an unanticipated increase that we had. Our exemptions are down a bit, 13,000 is based on who's living in town, and we had a little increase to charter tuition reimbursement, which the state helps fund us for other students attending charter schools. Well, good news here is that from the governor's original budget, our school choice went up $46,000, so that's a bonus. It's good for the schools. And then our assessments, we have here what was originally estimated at $718,000. Unfortunately, that went up to $739,000, so we do have to account for that extra $20,000 assessments that the state will withhold from us. So the net impact for the general fund from what we had originally budgeted at the annual town meeting versus the signed budget is an increase of $333,000, which we have not seen an increase like this in years. So that's very positive, good timing for us. Next up is local revenue. Basically, the estimates that we had in at town meeting are still holding true. We still want to be cautious with those estimates moving forward, so we did not change any of those projections for right now. Then we have a little summary here on how we got from a $378,000 deficit at town meeting to getting ready to submit the recap and work on a tax rate. So our tax revenue is down a net $92,000, but our state aid's up $233,000. So overall, revenue is up $241,000. So our expenses for the schools, the budget increased $378,000, and we had a little bit extra in the change in allowance for abatements. So as we were working on the two budgets, we were focusing on the override budget, and then, you know, if we had minor changes, we would just account for it in the allowance for abatements at that time. So we can whittle that down a bit to $136,000 less, basically, and that's going to tie right out to the revenue increase. So what that means is that we don't actually need any action at town meeting to balance the FY25 budget, which is nice. Any questions?
Sorry, can you just describe again the allowance for abatements to
Sure.
the layperson?
So we were working on, the allowance for abatements, that's an account that we have at the assessors where if somebody returns a motor vehicle or, you know, they challenge their assessment, they can go to the assessors and apply for an abatement. So we do have to set aside a certain amount of money for that account just to refund people who have earned it. And we also have that, the senior means tested exemption in there that is paid for out of this account as well. So it's about $25,000 or so worth of that, but we're trying to increase the parameters to hit more people. So, you know, hopefully we have a little more exemptions granted from that account as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thanks, Ann. It was mostly good news.
Mostly, yeah.
Always nice to go to town meeting without having to ask for more money from the taxpayers or move things around. So that's where we are. We're very, very early on, as you can tell, into the budget, but so far, so good. So one part of this discussion was the budget and where we are and how we're heading, and then secondly was sort of a recap of where we are with efficiencies we outlined in the budget task force plan. So Kristen and I talked this afternoon. I know she's got a list of items for discussion, and mostly good news there too, I think.
Yes, we're making progress. Dan is going to bring up a slideshow just for those who are remote and the audience. This is uploaded to the packet for this evening. So we met on June 27th, and us as staff and members of the select board selected 5 efficiencies to move forward with related to how we are looking at how we do business for the town of Westford. Dan, next slide, please. We looked at vehicle fueling at the DPW garage, exploring options for health insurance, including plan design changes, or joining a collaborative or the GIC or Maya, looking at our recreation enterprise and the income that we get from that versus the expenses, exploring options for a pay-as-you-throw type of program for solid waste or reduction of solid waste, how the Road and Bush lease is currently structured and how we may want it to be structured in the future. And then I do have a tracking list of all of the other things that were listed in the Budget Task Force report, as well as other items that we've collected over the course of time related to efficiencies. So next slide, Dan. This is a little bit out of place, but I wanted to just, Val had asked for this slide to be here, the current state of fiscal 25. I think Dan did a great job on that verbally, so if people want to look back on this after the meeting, that will be up there in that location. I want to go to the next slide. So we're really happy to report that the vehicle fueling at the DPW garage for all town departments is complete. Kyle Fox, the DPW director, as well as members of IT and other staff, worked really diligently over the course of the past 4 or 5 months to bring those departments that were fueling at the standard gasoline public pumps to now be fueling at the DPW garage. The WEX cards at the public pumps were running about $3.69 a gallon. Fuel at DPW right now is about $2.86 a gallon. We do see that decreasing again. We were not running everyone through this program until about July 28th, but we did actually see a savings of over $1,000 in July for running half of the crew through. We are very early in August at this point in time. We've already saved over $1,500. So we do see that this efficiency year to year, if gasoline prices stay the way they are, about a $30,000 savings. It's not huge, but it's definitely, getting somewhere. So I would respectfully ask that this efficiency now come off of our list. We'll replace it with something else, but wanting to keep tracking this, and we'll keep reporting on what budget savings we're seeing over the course of time. I think through August, September, October, we should really be seeing a trend related to those vehicles and how they're fueling. The next is exploring options for the health insurance. So as many of you are aware, the town of Westford has been partially self-insured since March of 2022. We have a health insurance trust fund that moves forward with the accounts, and we have a health insurance trust, a membership of select board members, finance committee members, town staff, and others who manage that trust fund. At the end of fiscal 23, we had a negative fund balance of $387,000, which was not in a good position. However, the fiscal 24 fund balance is in a much better position at over $733,000, which is about a $1.1 million increase. We did raise rates in November, so that is partially due to that. However, our experience has slightly shifted for the better in fiscal 24. The health insurance trust was charged by the select board to look at other plan options, such as the GIC, Maya, another cooperative plan designs, and the health insurance trust has been meeting diligently over the summer to review those. It's not an apples to apples comparison. There are so many different nuances that go into this, but we still are committed to reviewing that and having some more information by the end of August, early September for this group. We have begun to schedule those meetings with the GIC and Maya for the trust members and other employee groups to attend those. We're also seeking bids for our renewal November 1st for partially self-insured, fully insured, and other groups. So those will be brought to the Health Insurance Trust and my desk shortly. It is a small amount of savings, but the town has moved forward to using a program called Canna RX, which is a prescription drug program where our employees and their dependents can order prescription drugs from Canada that are more generic in nature. We have saved $2,000 since January. I know it's not a lot of money right now, but it does take a while for our employees and their dependents to use that service, see the resources, see the challenges, but we do see this program taking off into the future and hopefully providing additional savings in that account.
So, Kristen, do the employees benefit from, if we say $2,000?
Yes.
Is there a benefit to the employee?
Yes, so with the $2,000 saving to the town, I believe it was just under $200 in premium savings for the employee.
So can we publicize that, maybe get more employees to,
Yep,
because if it was a zero-sum game, why change? But if you can save money yourself, then you're good for both the town and okay.
All right, we are also exploring the options for a potential pay-as-you-throw solid waste system. I just want to give some statistics. As Dan stated in his earlier comments, we did finish our tonnage for fiscal 24 slightly higher than fiscal 23. I firmly believe that a lot of people got rid of a lot of materials in May and June because they knew that Acme would pick those things up, and they knew we were having further restrictions with E.L. Harvey coming into fiscal 25. We have had meetings with E.L. Harvey, and they're actually very pleased with the way people are putting out their trash and recycling. They see very few households over the 96-gallon limit. They say our recycling is extremely clean, so we look forward to receiving those reports from E.L. Harvey coming out in the future for our fiscal 25 solid waste and recycling. As I stated, E.L. Harvey started hauling both trash and recycling July 1st. We will begin enforcing that 96-gallon limit the week of September 1st, I believe, and we will be stickering those households and leaving that trash behind that exceeds that. We also changed our bulk waste program that anything over 50 pounds or over a certain dimensions is contracted directly with E.L. Harvey from the customer, and that does not go into our waste stream. So it's yet to be seen how our bulk waste is going to be operating in terms of revenue or lack of revenue. And then our sticker costs increased from $5 to $15 on items 50 pounds or less at that point in time. We have requested that E.L. Harvey provide us some options and costs, if there are additional costs, to going fully automated collection or some other hybrid pay-as-you-throw option. So we're waiting to hear back from them, and I hope to hear back in the next week or two to then present that information to the select board to determine where we want to go. And if there were going to be a change, it would be my recommendation to make that change for a fiscal 26 budget year. And you want to go to the next slide. So the recreation enterprise, there was a concern from the budget task force work related to the general fund subsidy that the recreation enterprise was receiving on a year-to-year basis. I don't want to belabor, but obviously COVID shut down the after-school program. The subsidy in fiscal year 24, when we're still trying to recover from that, for the rec enterprise from the general fund was $263,000. In the fiscal 25 budget, we brought that down to just over $35,000. Myself, Michelle Collette, the Director of Recreation, and Dan O'Donnell are working very diligently on all aspects of recreation revenue right now and all aspects of recreation expenses. They have an excellent spreadsheet and analysis going. We're also working with the Parks and Recreation Commission on calendaring when they set rates, when they decide what programs to change, so that we're in a better cadence to better prepare for our budgets on a year-to-year basis. But for fiscal 24, our revenue actually outpaced the operating budget, which we're proud to say that. And as well, we're seeing the increase in after-school care enrollment. We also did see a rate increase with that, so we did not see a decrease in enrollment with that rate increase. So we're continuing to monitor that closely, and we're going to continue to track the revenue. Not similar, but on the same vein as the fleet fueling, I would respectfully ask that this comes off of the efficiencies. We can certainly update you on a time-to-time basis, but we feel that we're in a better place right now in terms of tracking this. If we were to ever see the subsidy increase or have to increase, we'd bring that to the select board and the finance committee, but I don't see that tracking at this point in time based upon projections. And then we have continue to review the Road and Bush lease. I can't share too many details on that because it's still under executive session with the select board, but we began the negotiations with the Road and Bush Community Center in March of 2024. Their lease is set to expire on June 30th, 2025. In concert with this, we are also doing a town-wide space analysis study in which our architect actually has been over to the Road and Bush facilities, the 3 buildings, to review how those buildings operate, to review how Road and Bush uses those buildings, and then to integrate how the town uses their space as well. So we hope to have more to share in another month or 2 on this, but again, it's pretty closed-door type of negotiations related to the Road and Bush lease. And then finally, I wanted to give an update on some other potential efficiencies that are moving forward. Back in June, our veteran service officer moved to another position within the town of Westford. So that position currently is operating by Terry Stater, again in a part-time nature. So we are not filling that position full-time. I've had several successful conversations with town managers in other municipalities that may be willing to take us on as a regional veterans opportunity. I don't see this as a huge cost savings. It will probably be in the tens of thousands range rather than hundreds of thousands range. That budget is not huge anyway, but we see that efficiency could come to fruition as soon as October. We right now are not spending the full salary budget with our person being part-time at this point in time.
Just one question there. So if it's regionalized, would they have office hours in Westford for our veterans? Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
That has been one of the requirements that I've stated, that they do need to have office hours in Westford. Another thing that we're seeing as a sustainability effort is we no longer have the sustainability coordinator, but the select board authorized us to use $50,000 over the course of 2 years to contract with our regional planning agency, Northern Middlesex Council of Governments, to study our sustainability efforts, to help us create a plan in concert with Clean Energy and Sustainability Committee, the Select Board, and working into our strategic plan, and then really to get the flywheel moving of what are the sustainability goals and efforts that we're going to work on to hopefully lower emissions and lower energy costs if possible. They're also going to be looking at some waste zero options for us as well, whether it's composting or pay as you throw or something else. So we see that that's going to be a great partnership, not necessarily having an employee, but having that regional resource where sustainability is such a regional action.
That's a 2-year contract, right?
That
So
is
it's $25,000 per year?
Yes, that's correct. And then the last thing, we just wanted to update this group. Ambulance revenue has been up. The fire department had asked for an increase of those fees of the select board in October. We're seeing an increase of those fees, not only from the rate increase, but also the number of calls that are coming in related to ambulance services. So there's some other bits and pieces that I'm working on in the background related to efficiencies. I'm not ready to present those to the group at this point in time. So I think we're ready to turn it over to questions of the boards if you're ready.
Yes, on the ambulance, the increased calls, is that in town or is that mutual aid? Do we have an idea?
I think there are more calls in town, definitely, but yeah, I believe it's in town. But
any questions? You're all dazzled by Christian's brilliance.
I got a couple of questions.
Dennis?
I have just 3 things I want to touch base with you on, see what's happening. The first issue was, as we discussed at the closeout of last budget year, we noticed that in several discussions with department heads, 2 in particular, there was a few issues about the way we do the contracts. You know, there were one year and off contracts. Have we done any movement in regards to trying to come up with a better policy that maybe gives us a little bit more extended contracts?
Sure. So Mike Edwards has been working with town council to get all of our contract language up to date. Some of it was lacking related to current state law or current best practices. We're running all of the contracts through Mike at this point in time to review that. I believe that water department was one of those departments
That's
that you
correct,
referenced.
yes.
I don't think that we've had any water contracts come through at this point in time, but we'll double check with them of when they anticipate coming up with some new contracts that are necessary.
The second issue that I want to raise up, it was a discussion. I know you just identified that the public safety communications went down one position. You're not going to fill that position.
Correct.
Has there been any movement or any exploration with regards to regionalization of that particular service? We've been having a conversation with anybody about it, or what's going on with that?
Sure, I have had brief conversations with area town managers about that. I don't see that we're in a position for the right fit at this point in time, but it continues to be on my whiteboard of potential efficiencies in my office.
And the last one I got for you is this. You mentioned, as I understand it, there's two public safety, 2 police positions, patrolman positions or patrol officer positions that are not going to be refilled, right?
Correct.
Plus you have a deputy chief that's retiring, okay?
No, the deputy chief was backfilled.
Oh, he was backfilled, okay. So the point I'm trying to make is, and I also, you made some references to other departments with people leaving. So when you've got that kind of attrition situation going, just a suggestion, that's a good time to consider some reorganization. If you have now 2 less patrol officers, I mean, the last time we did the police department, there was the chief, the deputy chief, and 2 captains. You may want to be able to see if you can lighten that a little bit. That's a heavy load to carry. So if you can, maybe you can lighten that a little bit, particularly with the captain's position. That's it.
Anybody else?
I do have a question online.
Okay, yep.
And I want to point this to Chris Chu. So we presented a lot of town efficiencies this evening. Chris, there's a question from Diane Wood online of when will the budget efficiencies, if any, updated be for the schools coming to this group?
Sure, thank you. Well, I think one of the things is that all of that information about the health trust is also impacting the schools as well too, in terms of the number of employees that are supported by the health trust. So that is something that has been, that is impacting both the town and school sides. What we've been looking at is the recommendations from the budget task force first and foremost, and the task force had found that the schools in all of the different state function codes were spending below what the comps were as well too, as we were looking at things. I mean, most of our efficiencies have been taking place in the reductions that we've made for enrollment purposes, right? That we've been doing over the last couple of years, and we'll continue to look at that as well too. In addition, FY25, we will now see that we, the efficiency of looking at outsourcing our special education transportation. And one of the things we're hoping to see over a longer period of time is a positive impact on the development of the 18 to 22-year-old program that we're putting into place in FY25 as well too. We also, since our last meeting, we met, Valerie Young met with me and with Jenny Lynn, our director of school finance. We met with a community member who was presenting some research that they had done, looking at whether there would be potential cost savings if we were to explore purchasing our own bus fleet. Well, we just had an initial meeting, and we're looking at the methodology that this person was using, so we can kind of track that with the information that we have. We're looking to see if that is something that would result in significant savings or not. But that we don't have any data for that right now. We're just going to look at that and look at the information that was shared with us and sort of check it with the real numbers that we're seeing with the hours that our or that the contracted bus drivers are working and such. I don't know if Valerie or Catherine or anybody can think of something that I might be missing.
I would just add that we know that one of the deliverables was working on as a committee, our revolving funds guidelines. And so we expect, depending on the next date of our next one, we'd be able to bring a draft of that to this meeting.
Erica.
Erica Cole, Francis Silver. I just want to follow up on Dennis's question about the staffing, and the number of voters who actually chose to vote indicated that the level of money that they approved was inadequate to fund all of the police officers and fire officers that we have. And so I'm wondering, this is a process question, but in light of that, and in light of the amount of attrition that has already occurred, because I think the police have had a lot of retirements, was what I heard. And there's also an assistant highway superintendent, there's a stormwater engineer. So there's hiring that sounds like it's being done, and I'm wondering about the process by which that happens. What sort of documentation is provided to the select board, the FinCom, and the public in order to understand how we make hiring decisions? And I admit that I am saying this in light of recognizing that there is an unfilled position with the only position that was paying for itself, which is the sustainability coordinator, and we are choosing to not fill that, and we are apparently choosing to fill the other ones. And I'm wondering about the process and what documentation is provided that justifies the hiring of these individuals and not that one.
I'll just say that from the standpoint of, we explained to town meeting that if the override were to fail, here are the spots we'd cut. And one of those was sustainability. Some of those were police, some of those were fire. So those slots aren't being hired because we basically told the town this is the cost of doing business without an override. Other spots that we're filling are in the approved budget, but in terms of process, how we go about doing that. I know.
So is that true that the number, I mean, it was a pretty big number, saying we're going to have this many fewer public safety people? Is that
two police,
are they
two fire.
truly all gone? Is that?
We didn't.
Is that what happened?
We didn't lay any of them off
I
because
agree,
those
there's
positions were not
attrition,
filled.
but I'm
Yes,
wondering,
we didn't. We,
are those the whole number of people that were supposed to be lost, are they truly being lost,
Yes.
or are they being rehired?
no, they're lost.
Okay.
It's just, remember, one thing about, the chief isn't here, but, with police, one of the challenges is when someone leaves the department, you then have to go find a new hire. They have to pass physical, psych, background checks. They go through the academy. They have to go through field training here. So when you have an officer leave today, his or her replacement may not be here for 10 months. So there is that staggered with police, to some degree fire, because with the fire academy, there is that lag between someone leaving and someone being replaced. But the budget head count is down 2 for each department.
It's down 2, or the number that was
2 for each department.
advertised? I thought the numbers were much higher.
I think you're talking about future years.
It gets worse if without an override, hypothetically,
Yeah, the override,
was for one.
the advertised numbers that I saw on the chart that we put out.
That was over.
Police, 2 fire, 1 dispatch, and 1 DPW was what was.
That was year
I've
one.
clearly memorized.
That was year
You
one.
did. I know you did, because you were.
But that was year one. So
That was year one.
if we had future years,
Okay, so maybe I am thinking of future years, because I remembered a bigger number, and that's
yeah,
probably
over
the case.
3 years was much bigger.
That's probably the case. That's probably the case. But I still am wondering about the process.
Yeah, so can I answer
Yeah.
for a second? So the process is, back in probably January or February last year, I put in place a hiring freeze, that we would not hire any new positions unless they were mission critical positions, pending the outcome of the override question. With the override not passing, I sent out another directive to the departments that the hiring freeze was lifted for fiscal '25 positions that were authorized. However, I was reviewing all of the positions before they were rehired. So every single job advertisement comes to my desk before it's even advertised, so I can have a conversation with that department head about the mission criticalness of that position and the likelihood or not of that being able to be funded in the fiscal '26 budget. So as the hiring and firing authority for the majority of the employees in town, that's my duty to make sure that we're hiring responsibly based upon future circumstances.
Jordan, that's it, John?
Well, some of that, as we looked at it, there were additional reductions in the follow-on fiscal year if we didn't get the override. So I think that's adding the numbers.
Yeah.
That's where those additional numbers are coming from.
I think that's true. I think I was thinking into the future.
You aggregated them.
I did. I think I did.
Well, it's fine, because we advertise it.
Yeah.
It's a 3-year plan.
Yeah.
It's true.
And if it fails, it's a 3-year plan to deal with it.
Yeah.
FY '26 is a different animal.
And it's on its way. Okay. Thank you.
Can I ask a question, just out of curiosity?
Always, Catherine.
And it kind of, dovetails with Dennis and Erica's questions. When we talk about, when we looked at our space needs and enrollment needs, we had a feasibility study. Obviously the town is going through the same with the space analysis. When it comes to public safety, and forgive me if this is a really naive question, is there an option to have like an independent review of our public safety in terms of needs, staffing, organization? Is that something that exists? Is it something that we could consider? Because I think it might help in some of these conversations as the year, as the budgets go on about, kind of having that independent eye on our staffing and, help with the FY '26 conversations as we start those. I don't know if it exists. I don't know, Dennis, if you've.
It does.
There is standards.
Sorry, John.
Yeah, well, back in, 2017, I think, or 2019, there was a study done, that was internally done.
Okay.
And that's where they came up with adding an additional 5 patrol officers and I think some additional fire personnel.
It was 17.
17.
This was before COVID.
Yeah, and, but there was there wasn't any numerical connection between the assessment and the numbers that were decided. So there are methodologies to look at, but The police department, in fact, has had a difficult time just maintaining the 50 that were authorized as a result of that. So now the authorization for the police department is 48.
So I mean, as one of the folks who did the study, so, because John asked a very good question back in 2016 or so, which is, do we have, too many? And so the Finance Committee, Dennis Rona, and myself and Tom Clay from the Select Board spent months with the police, fire chiefs, deputy chiefs, dispatchers, going over our calls, our banning, response times, and then where are the times of the day when there are some days where you don't want to know, but there's no one in that station, and we're waiting upon Acton, Groton, Littleton to come help us out. So how do you, have the right staff that you don't have too many, but that you can, because you don't want to staff for the peak, but you do want to staff for the average. And we at the time determined that we were short, I think, 5 police officers and 8 firefighter medics. Of course, now we never did get all. We couldn't afford to hire them all at once. We were hiring 1 here and 2 there. We never did get all 8 firefighter medics. I think we did get to the 5th cop finally. Never actually hired the person because of the lag, but we got that person in the queue. Is there an independent? One thing we did is took a look at area departments. One problem with us looking at a regional comparable is we are the big town. Groton, Carlisle, all smaller. Chelmsford has a private ambulance service, so the comparables are difficult when it came to that, but that was our...
And I don't want to take from, because clearly I know the work that goes into these reports and tasks. I just curious as, would it be helpful, even if that independent eyes over it is kind of saying, you know what, we hit it spot on, you've calculated right, this is exactly what we need. But sometimes I think for building that trust, and especially in the conversations we saw happen in this past few months regarding the budget, just like kind of, essentially having that external viewpoint might be helpful.
I'll let John go then.
Well, one of the things, that study rose out of a suggestion or recommendation that we use a work-based or workload-based assessment of the police department to determine the number of policemen required. There's not really an acceptable or widely accepted methodology for that, but a work-based one would be a good start, which says, how many calls for service do they have versus, how many patrolmen they have and whatnot. And of course, this town has an issue. You look at that, the number of calls, but then you also look at the area they have to cover, because we're a pretty large town. There are some methodologies out there. There are some institutions that'll take a look at that. But I never have been able to find a widely accepted methodology for that. The best ones that's most attractive is the work-based. How many calls do they get? How many responses they have to make? And then how much time is allotted for each of those? So there's a way to do that.
Yeah, I just, one of the observations is we make a decision as a town that we want to have manpower or person power to respond to motor vehicle accidents, domestics, the things you have to respond to. You also want to have people on patrol to find the weaving car on the road or whatever. So you want to have some apportionment. So what the challenge? How do you staff appropriately? You can't look at strictly the call volume, because you want to have that added. In fact, I think it was Tingsborough's town meeting. They said, I go through Westford and I see police, on patrol. Why can't we have that? So, as a town, we have to decide what's our level of service. Do we want to have that or not? And if we want to have that, then there's a requirement to staff it. Dennis.
To her point, though, I would say that was not done through a independent firm, and there are several firms out there that specialize in police staffing, in police evaluations. One of the issues that came up, I'm sure John remembers as well, is that at least the previous chief tried to justify the increase based upon call volume. Okay, not really an acceptable measure. What is really acceptable is workload. And when you say workload, you have to go about how many part 1 crimes, what's your actual, what are you generating for accidents? What are you generating? That's where you work. It's not just pure call numbers. And I think the town might do well by having someone come in and be able to do something like that.
Well, take that under advisement. Thanks. Good question, though. Very good question. Andy, you've been very patient.
Bergamini, 78 Graniteville Road, also self-appointed mayor of Graniteville. I have a couple of questions, comments, whatever. The last when this group last got together, there was a discussion about asset inventory, and that the program hadn't been fully loaded, or blah 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 blah. Where is that?
Sure, I can start and Mike can correct me if I missed something. So we are currently working with, so assets, we'll define assets, so it could be buildings, it could be vehicles, it could be roadway signs, equipment, those types of things. Currently, we have an architect, Tecton Architects, going through the majority of town buildings to help us understand the uses of those buildings and some of the assets and the useful life there, so that's in progress. The DPW currently uses, and the facilities department for the town side, and the facilities also works for the school side, uses a asset management software called Brightly software, where they take in work orders and then process those work orders to do the work on the systems or on the vehicles or the equipment. We are not fully loaded in that system at this point in time.
Why not? It was
Sure.
a month and a half ago that we said we haven't finished
Yeah.
loading that.
So it's really.
How long does it take to do that?
It takes a long time when we don't have an assistant DPW director, we don't have a DPW business manager, we don't have an assistant facilities director, so it's really a manpower issue. Right now, those positions are really triaging the emergencies and the need to fix it now type of thing. So it is gonna take us quite a bit of time without the manpower that we have now to input those assets.
I'm trying to control myself because
okay.
tonight I've heard excuse after excuse after excuse after excuse. And one of the things that's frustrating to me and my peers who don't wish to be identified at this point is that I don't feel a sense of urgency. I just don't feel it. It's, oh, we're working on that, we're working on this. Well, maybe we could do this and maybe we could do that. And I will guarantee you, because I live on Graniteville Road and we have a screened-in porch, so my wife and I spend a lot of time out there, and we see vehicles go by, and you see these zero-turn lawnmowers go by, and you watch them go by and go, how many of those things do we have in this town? And the other thing is, what's the age of them? What's supposed to be the turnover? Can we get another year out of them? And that kind of thing. You made a comment at the last meeting, Kristen, that you said that there was a hand-down program from the police department vehicles. That when nobody seems to know what that's all about, and what vehicles and when were they handed down to other departments in the town?
Yep, so
That's a question.
the one that I'm aware of was handed down from the fire department to recreation and conservation.
So
and
just one.
That's the one I'm aware of right now. I know
don't
other
have a program.
other police department vehicles do get handed down to either detectives or others that are working in the field related
That's
to
in the
police.
same department.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? That's in the same department.
So
But
the
I see a
vehicles
lot
that-
of new town vehicles go by. I'm saying, and I hate to sound like an old guy and say, well, when I was in, but we had vehicles that would last 12 years. And I know there's a formula that says when you start spending X number of dollars, the vehicle is no longer viable and you need to get a new one. But you don't need to get one every 2 years, and you don't need to get one every 3 years if the vehicle is running okay and it's low maintenance.
My
So
understanding, and Dan,
I don't feel anybody's watching that. In fact, I don't feel like a lot of people are watching a lot of stuff that they should be watching. Because to me, assets are a big drain on the budget.
no, that's one of our main goals, and actually the
But
select
it's
board
not on
just.
it wasn't on your,
It's not on an efficiency, but it's on the select board goals that they just signed on Tuesday night. Is
why
to
wouldn't it be on the efficiencies? Because that's where you can gain some efficiencies.
and definitely look at getting on.
So the other thing is that, and this goes back, I was on the recycle commission for over 20 years, and pay-as-you-throw kept coming up, and I opposed it vehemently, because I just said, no, you can't do that. You know what? It's time. People need to understand that there's a cost associated with throwing stuff away. And I have to say, I'm extremely disappointed that, first of all, I can't understand we're in the middle of August and we don't have the June trash numbers. I don't know how that's possible. And again, this gets back to this urgency issue, is that why don't we already have those numbers? There's June. That was a month and a half ago.
We had the June trash numbers in.
I thought you said you didn't.
No. we
No,
don't
I didn't have the July Harvey numbers.
I'm sorry, the July number. No, the June number. You have the June numbers.
Yes,
So,
have the June numbers.
so there was an increase.
yes.
And some of it we're blaming on the fact that people started throwing stuff away because they knew we would.
I'm not placing any blame. That's my gut feeling, but it's not blaming
but-
anyone.
Okay, I'll let that go because that's a lame excuse. We should have seen that coming. You know.
We
it-
did.
We
it-
did anticipate it.
expected that.
And what did you
Yeah.
do? Not expected it.
Well, there was
Like, say, the
nothing to
beginning
do.
of June, you stopped selling stickers. You know, I mean, if you knew that there was gonna be a surge, you slow it down, or you limit the number of tickets that you're able to sell. So to say, oh, well, that's because of this, that says to me that you didn't think forward and say, why didn't we try to
I have to
curtail
ask you a
it?
question.
Yeah.
So are you suggesting that once we knew this was going to that we knew this was going to happen and we
If
did?
we thought it was going to happen, I know you
that-
can't know that it's
that
going to happen.
When somebody came in to ask for a sticker in June, we shouldn't have given it to them?
Could curtail the number of tickets, I didn't say stop it.
How do you curtail, how do you say to
number
one
of tickets
person,
you
no, I'm
sell."
sorry, you can't have a sticker, but this person can?
There is a if you go up and down the street, I'm not looking for a hero badge, but I have a pickup truck, and I will go up and down the streets in Graniteville and whatnot. And if I see people throwing a chest away, now it's changed now, but back then, when people are throwing bureaus away,
I know,
chests away,
bureaus,
and I
sofas,
throw them in
whatever.
the back of my truck and take them down to Acton to recycle, so somebody can use them. We allow people to throw stuff away for cheap. And this is just a complaint. You raise the ticket on 50 pounds or less of items. That should have been $50. And I know people got upset. That's too bad. It costs money to get rid of stuff. And people just think there's this ferry that comes in the middle of the night and he makes the trash go away. And he doesn't. And it costs the town a lot of money. And this is why I say, you really need to take a harder look at pay as you throw. You get one 32-gallon bucket, that's what you get, and if you can stuff everything in there, God bless you. But beyond that, you pay for it. And you really need to look at that as a way to curtail the cost of getting another.
Which we are. We're actively looking at that.
Right, we are doing that.
But pick it up. You know what I'm saying? Everything I hear, we're working on that.
No,
We're
no,
looking at that.
this is going to be a fiscal 26 budget discussion with the select board and the finance committee.
Okay, so why does it have to be 26?
We have the budget in place for fiscal 25. If it happens sooner, it happens sooner, but
Yeah.
our latest is going to be fiscal 26 if the select board moves that
Okay.
forward.
I mean,
There's also the consideration of the need to have somewhat of a measured pace to a change. I understand the urgency that you feel, but one of the consequences of raising the sticker price, we've had a significant increase in illegal dumping. So there are
how
costs.
significant?
We've
That's
had
a
at
subjective
least 7
term.
instances this month, up from
And
the
to
occasional
what
instance.
magnitude? To what magnitude?
Mattresses, furniture, we've had a number of items left at the community gardens. And the trade-off of raising the rates and telling people you can no longer dispose of things is they dump them. So
But you can't let that intimidate you from making an
it's not an
intelligent decision.
intimidation, it is a measured process to get us to a point where we have alternative ways for people to dispose of things.
I'll try to behave myself.
Well, it's also
No,
the
it's
case,
just-
you also have to have, I mean, the very fact, when we changed from one vendor to another, we had a lot of complaints about communication for simply changing providers.
Right.
And changing the times of pickup.
Jeez, I thought
We
you
still
guys did a
people,
good
we still
job
people
of
who are gonna be
communicating.
paying,
Yeah.
a lot more
Yeah.
for trash. They don't communicate that and don't socialize that, that's a big problem. We can't just enact it, it has to have.
Oh, no, I understand that. I mean, and you're gonna have people up in arms about that. I understand that, but you gotta face the music.
Well, it's also, what the trash created by a family of 2 versus a family with, 3 kids is different, so, we don't set the budget based upon.
I understand that, but we've
also-
been talking about this for 30 years, and I'm not exaggerating, 30 years. When do we stop talking?
Well, you had to take this into context with what else we were looking at. We were looking at an override.
Yeah.
And to add this on top of an override, a significant increase like that was just like pouring water on a drowning
Yeah,
man. I mean,
the override didn't happen.
I know it didn't happen, But you still got, still have that argument that says that's just another way of taxing the folks. By increasing the pay as you throw, that'll free up X amount of money to go back into the budget. So you have that argument.
It's back-
So we're looking at that,
it's
we're
back to
going to
override.
address it and try to come up with something that makes reasonable sense to the impact on the individual
I understand,
homeowner.
but when
and
you've heard
individual
this
on the
30
tax.
years in a row, it gets old. It gets old, and I just,
And
again,
There's a-
pardon me for
there's a
passing judgment,
balance.
but I'm not feeling any urgency in anything. And
There's-
that's what's getting to me as a taxpayer, because you came to me, and the Board of Selectmen was unanimous to have an override. And you came to me and you said, I'm gonna stick my hand in your pocket and take money out of your pocket because I can't run the town efficiently. So that's what you said to me when all of you voted for an override. And the people in Westford said, no, you're not gonna do that this time. And what was it, by 800 votes? People are sick of this.
But the point is,
And
if you-
I'm just sticking my neck out and saying, you need to stop thinking override when you don't manage properly. If companies were run like that, they'd all go down, they'd all be bankrupt. They don't do that.
But whether you have an override or you have a trash fee, either way, you're taking money from the taxpayer.
Forget the trash, forget the page you throw. I mean, I'm just saying, in general, stop thinking about reaching into my pocket. It's getting old. It's getting I have lost 3 friends who've moved out of town, who have been here all of their lives. And they said, I can't take it anymore. And they're all from the villages. We got people in the villages that are living on fixed incomes. You're gonna hit them again. That was your intention, everybody's intention. And particularly because I've lived in this town my entire life, I resent that. Because that says, I'm gonna be inefficient because I can always reach into your pocket and take more money out of it. And I'm just saying, just don't. So, I've said my piece, and I don't wanna argue anymore, but just saying, you guys gotta get better at this, much better at this. So, I appreciate the time, but that's all I gotta say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for your input.
Would it be helpful on the pay as you throw to have some sort of a timeline put out there, just for?
Aren't we?
We
isn't-
do, so the timeline is to,
is it on the select board discussion sometime?
we're supposed to get quotes back from Harvey in 2 weeks, I believe, or so. And then, the goal is if we were to do anything, we'd be lined up to go for fiscal '26, so we're working back from that at this point in time.
I'm just wondering would it help to put it on a document, because clearly we have residents who aren't aware of that or whatever to.
Yes, we've been.
I know you're
we are
working
working
on
on
it.
it,
No,
okay?
I
And
understand that.
it's a goal for Kristen, it's on
Yeah.
her goals.
Yeah.
And,
Just helpful.
So, I mean, from the day when we'd actually hired Harvey, we were talking about this day coming.
Yeah,
So
yeah, oh no, I know that.
The town
I'm
should
just
be aware it's
saying,
coming.
we're clearly not communicating that, I think, to residents in terms of a timeline.
Anything else tonight? In that case,
I guess just as a closing thought, and I think I did this in the last meeting too, but FY '24, we looked at, and we did a great job, I think, explaining for someone who's never seen that amount of closeouts before. And then FY '25, the state aid looks like better than we had hoped. Some might call that magic, right? So I think I just want to make sure that anyone watching has an idea of what we're still thinking about for FY '26 deficit, or what still concerns us as a group. Like, I just want to make sure that note is at the end, so that it's not just, great, we, FY '24 and FY '25 look okay.
I think yeah, I talked to Kristen, and, right now, we don't know enough about 26. Nothing's changed. The closeouts were.
If nothing's changed, I
Right.
think we can just
Right,
reiterate.
but the closeouts are what we thought they'd be. I mean, they look good, but they're always around 5 million, as Dan said. And, we're gonna get a bonus from the state for Chapter 70. That's $300,000 in a budget of, 120 million, whatever. So it doesn't really change
I don't
things, so.
disagree, Scott, it's just that at town meeting, we talked about, we don't know where that money's coming from, it's a little irresponsible, so we say these things, and then it looks like it just kind of worked out in our favor, and I just wanna make sure that we're explaining all of those things for someone who are just following along new because of the override.
No, fair enough. I think what we saw was maintaining, nothing is getting worse, nothing's getting a whole lot better. I mean, there's a few $100,000 here and there, which I know is real money, but when your problem is 3.6 million, that's not really changing it. So until we know a little more as we begin the budget process, I know Kristen's gone through her directive to her department heads. What we're still planning right now is a $3.6 million problem to work our way through. You want to add to that?
No, I think we did send budget directives to the town departments as well as Dr. Chu last week that we are seeing a $3.6 million deficit at best. It could be worse than that, and we've asked departments to be as creative and efficient and effective moving forward when they submit their budgets. Yeah, go ahead.
Just to be clear, this is for FY '26.
Correct,
We've been
26.
talking about 3 different years. I just want to make sure
Yes,
that.
this is fiscal '26, yes. So there will be a lot of trimming necessary, cutting necessary in order to meet that $3.6 million deficit that we have currently. Again, it could get worse. We still have some indicators that we need to look at. It's still very early in the fiscal year for fiscal '25.
What do we have? I mean, I know we had the numbers that we put around. We actually had a placeholder for page to throw in our budget solutions, right? Wasn't it like?
I can't remember off the top of my head.
Really depends on the program, what type
Yeah,
you
I
kind
thought it was
of
like
bring in.
$800,000. I thought.
It depends on the split. If it's a 25% subsidy, a 75% subsidy, 100% subsidy. So I don't want to give any numbers.
I guess the point was the page to throw helps you out, but you're not going to find 3.6 million there because.
Not 3.6 million, but we're, as we presented tonight, $30,000 here, $10,000 here. It is going to add up, but we're not going to get that $3.6 million. No.
That 3.6 million for the total budget.
Total budget deficit for fiscal '26 as we currently see it.
Okay.
Okay, so we just schedule our next meeting, and I mean, we're calling this an efficiencies meeting, but the reality is we're spending a lot of time on the budget as part of the process, which I think is important because it educates the town as we or at least informs them, if not educates them. So we waited 2 months. Yep.
I was just wondering, we took some things off of the list that you feel like are complete. So do we have like a master list of all the efficiencies?
Yes.
So are we adding other priorities now that those other items have been kind of checked off? So
Yes. So I want to make sure that I get back with my team and the select board to understand what they want to move up, and we'll bring that back to you in the next meeting as well.
Yeah, because the really big one's healthcare, which we're tackling, and that's going to take some time to work out. So we met last time in June. We waited 2 months for this one because it was summertime. Do you want to wait 2 months again, which would be
Well,
October?
I guess part of it is you've started the budget process with the department heads, and I guess, do you want to, I don't know what the timeline is for that, but do you want to wait to, get some initial feedback about that, so that we have at least maybe a starting point before we schedule another meeting? And I don't know what the timeline for that is, in terms of when you'll have your first meetings with the budget, with your department heads, so.
For your benefit and members of the public, so the budgets are due in September 6th. It will take us several weeks just to combine them and make sure that we have everyone straight. Then we schedule budget meetings probably middle of September through the first week of October. So we can do it middle of October if you wish, or if we have earlier indications of solid waste and recycling and health insurance before that, we could get in touch with you now. So I would respectfully request that we don't schedule an actual date right now, but that we get in touch with you as soon as possible once we have those indicators on solid waste and recycling and health insurance. It may be before we have the budgets settled in October.
There's also a special town meeting, and I don't know what kind of prep goes into that from your staff, so.
Yeah. Should we either adjourn 10 minutes ago or wait?
Or we need to wait another 10 minutes. We don't need to hurry.
But I guess that being said, is there a motion to, well, if we want to wait till we get guidance, that's fine. Middle of October, I think, is not.
So we're kind of.
October 21st is town meeting?
Yeah, we're kind of thinking like 6 to 8 weeks out, roughly timeline.
So 6 weeks puts us like the end of September.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, 6 weeks is the end of September, so. Okay.
Hand up, John, or are you
No, I'm
counting? Okay.
just counting.
I think that's fine, but I think I like the suggestion of waiting until there is something to report. You know, if the end of September comes and you still don't have pay-as-you-throw numbers or whatever, then to push it another week or two.
That's pretty hard.
I think sounds fine.
I've got a question for
Okay.
Dan. Dan, when will we start looking at the way the FY25 budget's going as far as expenses versus the budget? Is that, do that quarterly? Need till October to look at that or something like that?
We do need expenses in, but like we can, like I track them as we go for the personal services. The expenses a little harder, but yeah, we can give an update quarterly. It's fine.
Usually, we start to hear it when we're hearing the budget, when we start hearing the budget,
Yeah.
which is like about the halfway point.
Yeah, for revenue and whatnot, I usually do projection halfway through the year because it takes a lot of time to throw that together. So.
Expense versus plan.
Okay, so if we're done, we've got 3 boards to adjourn, so Select Board is motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
We're gone.
Motion to adjourn? Second.
Motion,
Oh.
move to adjourn.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I
and
was
you did a
ahead.
second.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Great, thanks.
Motion to adjourn the Finance Committee. Dennis
So moved.
moving,
Yep.
second. I have to do a roll call. John?
Aye.
Beth?
Aye.
Cindy?
I was going to say, I'm not leaving.
I'm an aye.
You know, I thought about bringing my own.
Aye.
And, John?
Aye.
Sean was here.
Sean raised his hand when you have
Okay,
call for
all
it.
right. All right, so I'm gonna end the Zoom. Thank you all.